Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tracing humanity's epic 2,400-year battle against disease. It's an incredible journey that culminates in one of our absolute greatest scientific victories, the total eradication of smallpox and the fascinating birth of immunology. Here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at 5 key chapters, starting with ancient diseases and the first hints of immunity, moving into the terror of smallpox and a risky practice called variolation. Then we'll hit Jenner and the very first vaccine, look at humanity's first actual disease eradication, and wrap up with the new path of immunology. Part 1, Ancient Diseases and Immunity's Discovery. So, let's picture the ancient world. Disease was a total, terrifying mystery. Before we had any clue about germs, sudden mass deaths were usually blamed on divine wrath, evil spirits, or something called miasma, basically the idea that diseases were caused by bad air or toxic vapors. We were literally at the mercy of the unknown. Then comes the famous Greek physician Hippocrates. He tried to shift this whole paradigm by arguing that diseases were actually natural phenomena caused by an imbalance of 4 bodily humors. Now, sure, by today's standards, the science there was totally off, but philosophically, this was a massive leap forward. It meant treating disease as a natural process. And the ancients actually did pick up on some crucial clues. Take the devastating plague of Athens around 430 BC. The historian Thucydides documented this absolutely fascinating anomaly. He noticed that there was no case of the same person getting the disease twice. Because of this, the survivors actually became the caretakers. They didn't have the word immunity yet, obviously, but they realized the body somehow remembered a disease. Which brings us to part 2, terrifying smallpox and variolation. Despite those early clues about immunity, one specific disease remained the ultimate, absolute terror for thousands of years. I'm talking, of course, about smallpox. Caused by the variola virus, historians literally described it as the most terrible minister of death. It wiped out hundreds of millions of people. It would start with a high fever, terrible pain, and end in these severe, full-body, pus-filled blisters. And even if you were lucky enough to survive, you were usually left with severe, permanent scars. People were desperate to fight this thing. Over in Asia, they developed an intense preventative method known as variation. Now, this wasn't a vaccine. It involved deliberately infecting healthy people with actual live smallpox pus, just to induce a mild case and hopefully get that lifelong immunity. It worked, but man, it was a massive, highly dangerous gamble compared to the safer vaccination methods we developed later. But like I said, people were desperate. In the early 18th century, an English aristocrat named Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who had actually been severely scarred by smallpox herself, she saw this variolation happening in the Ottoman Empire. She was so convinced it was the answer that she had her own daughter variolated and actually brought this risky technique back to Europe. It caught on, it really did, but the brutal reality was still staring everyone in the face. Humanity desperately needed a safer alternative. Enter Part 3. Jenner and the first vaccine. That safer alternative was finally on the horizon, and it came from an English country doctor named Edward Jenner, along with a really bizarre rumor about milkmaids. The rumor went something like this. Dairy farmers noticed that anyone who caught cowpox, which, is just a mild disease that cows get, they never seemed to catch the deadly smallpox. Jenner heard these stories, and rather than just writing them off as peasant myths, he realized this could be the ultimate clue. Think about it. If cowpox protected you from smallpox, it could literally change the world. He just had to test it. So, in 1796, Jenner conducts this incredibly daring experiment. Step 1, he extracts cowpox pus from a milkmaid. Step 2, he inoculates an 8-year-old boy with that cowpox. And then step 3, this is the part that is just completely shocking by today's ethical standards. He deliberately exposes the boy to deadly smallpox to test his immunity. The result? Absolutely breathtaking. The boy did not get sick. The mild cowpox had successfully protected him from the deadly smallpox virus. It was this massive gamble, but it paid off, completely marking the birth of a revolutionary concept in medicine. Jenner published his astounding findings in a 1798 book, and obviously he needed a name for this brand new procedure. So he coined the term vaccine. He took it directly from the Latin word vacca, which actually means cow. Now, at first, people were pretty freaked out. There were even political cartoons drawn at the time showing people sprouting cow heads after getting the shot. But the sheer, undeniable effectiveness of the vaccine, it won out, and the practice spread like wildfire. That leads us to part 4, humanity's first disease eradication. Jenner's discovery kicked off a global campaign that eventually achieved the impossible. On May 8, 1980, the World Health Organization made this monumental, unanimous declaration. Smallpox eradication has been achieved throughout the world, and there was no evidence that smallpox will return as an endemic disease. Just let that sink in for a second. A disease that killed hundreds of millions of people, completely wiped off the face of the earth forever. Humanity was finally free from the fear of smallpox. Finally, part 5, the new path of immunology. So, smallpox was gone, but Jenner's vaccine actually left the scientific community with this massive, lingering question. People knew vaccines worked. They saw the results right in front of them, but they didn't really know the biological why. Why do we not get the same disease twice? How exactly does our body remember a pathogen that it saw months or even years ago? Well, the breakthrough didn't come until the late 19th century. A Russian biologist named Ilya Mechnikov was observing starfish larvae under a microscope, and he saw something completely astounding. Certain cells were actually surrounding and eating foreign substances. He called these phagocytes, which translates to eating cells. And this was huge. It proved for the very first time that our bodies aren't just passive vessels. We actually have an active cellular defense system. And just like that, the pillars of modern immunology were built. Now, Jenner lived way before the Nobel Prize even existed, but his vaccine was the undeniable foundation. From there, brilliant minds took the baton. Louis Pasteur expanded the experimental science, Behring discovered antitoxins, and of course, Mechnikov discovered those phagocytes. Together, they essentially mapped out the incredible defense network that's inside all of us. Because of their work, we now know exactly why Jenner's risky cowpox experiment worked. Exposing the body to something safe, but structurally similar, like cowpox, creates what we call an immune memory. The immune system gets trained, so if the actual, deadly smallpox virus ever tries to enter the body, our immune system instantly recognizes its structure and destroys it before it can even make us sick.
Looking back at this timeline, you can really appreciate the sheer scale of the journey. 430 BC in Athens, noticing immunity for the first time. Then 1796, Jenner's first vaccine. Fast forward to the late 19th century for the birth of immunology, and all the way to 1980 when the WHO finally eradicated smallpox. That is well over 2 millennia of observation, trial, and error.
And honestly, that's what makes this one of humanity's greatest triumphs. We literally evolved from hiding in terror from the invisible miasma of bad air to gaining absolute scientific mastery over our own immune systems. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Armed with our modern understanding of the immune system and technology that Edward Jenner couldn't have even fathomed, what ancient diseases will humanity eradicate next? Thanks for exploring this amazing piece of history with us.